This podcast is brought to you by Firehouse Subs, the firefighter-founded hot sub chain with a passion for hearty and flavorful food, heartfelt service, and public safety. Ready for your next mission? Firehouse Subs is offering firefighters the opportunity to continue serving after service, now as restaurant owners. Learn more at firehousesubsfranchising.com.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is in your time where you are now. I'm Mike Dugan. We are going to be here talking on our radio show about the supplement that went into fire engineering in the April edition. There will be a link to it on this. More air, more time, and we're going to talk to some of the people who authored some of the wonderful stuff in it. The reaction from the fire service has been immeasurable on how impactful this was. So we're going to be talking to myself and Tommy Merrill. We're going to be talking to Jimmy Davis, Daniel DeYear. Chief DeYear is joining us in a little while. And I'm here, of course, with my good friend Mike Gagliano. To all the moms in the fire service, I hope you had a wonderful Mother's Day. And to all the families, I hope you spent time with your family and appreciated your mom. Michael?
Well, Mike, this is, as always, this is an exciting time. We get to highlight not only some of the finest minds in the fire service, but as it turns out, some of the finest minds in the fire service are also our good friends. And so, not only is it cool to hang out with rock stars, it's fun to hang out with rock stars that you actually like, and you enjoy doing work with. I can't tell you folks how proud I am of this FDIC supplement that we collaborated with fire engineering, and really thankful, man, to our good buddy David Rhodes, our good buddy Diane Rothschild, helping us to fulfill the vision of the mission of the Firefighter Air Coalition, who created the supplement along with all the cool cats that we're going to talk to here in a minute. Michael, as you know full well, our mission is a simple one with the Air Coalition. We're interested in all things firefighter air, whether that means the doing of it, air management, doing all the things that are necessary to actually have the air on our backs to be able to fulfill our mission, to make interior attack, to go where the people are, to go where the fire is, and to knock that sucker down and to get folks out, whether it's the smoke, the fire dynamics, the residual medical stuff that comes from that, firefighter cancer, and all the other things. We're going to have Mike Champo on to kind of close us out and talk about his journey a little bit with firefighter cancer. Technology, which maybe we'll talk a little bit about today. We bring some technology that helps us in the firefight. Thank God, right? Glad we got SCBAs and thermal imaging cameras, and we'll talk about some of the newer technology if we get a chance about, FARs, the air stand pipe, and different types of fire hose and things like that we can use. And then all the research that's being done by our friends at NIOSH and FSRI and all the great research facilities across the country that are trying to find one more way, one more insight, one more tip, tactic, discovery that helps us to do what we do in a better way. This is just one part of the FAC mission. It's fire conferences. It's educational material that goes out through social media and through the website. Man, we don't care. We got no dog in the fight in how you learn. Our only fight is that you learn. Gang, we're coming at you from every angle we can. In June, in the Grand Prairie, Texas area, we've got the Fire Inside Fire Conference, June 23 through 25. Some of the finest people that I know are going to be speaking at that conference about attacking interior fire and being prepared for interior fire attack, and the fire inside of you to be prepared for interior fire attack. And then we're going to do a repeat, Michael, in September. We're going back a little bit south of Grand Prairie in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We're going to go with Houston Fire, and we're going to do a redo of the Fire in the Sky, which was wildly successful last year, man, and everybody had a blast. And we're going to bring back some old faces. We're going to bring in some new topics and some new faces, and we're just going to talk about fire in large structures and fire that's a football field in the sky and all the stuff that goes on with that. It's all centered around, exactly the types of things we're going to talk about today. We want to make sure that you're equipped to be able to meet the mission head on. And here's the reality of meeting the mission head on. You have to have three things. You have to have the bodies. You have to have firefighters. Those firefighters have to be trained. They have to be prepared for battle. You do have to have water. As good of firefighters as you are, as highly trained as you are, typically the game changer for us is we get a line laid, we get water on the fire, and we put the fire out. And so you have to have water, and you have to have, supplies of water and be able to get the water to the fire. And the third component that's absolutely essential, and it's the redheaded stepchild of the fire service, just like me, the redheaded stepchild. You have to have air. And it has always been something that has been minimized in our industry, and we've tried very hard to elevate it, and we're going to continue to try to elevate it. But hear me, folks, you can have all the firefighters in the world. You can FDNY, Chicago Fire Staffing. You can have all the water in the world. And if you don't have sufficient air to get in and sustain an interior attack, if you can't stay in there because you don't have a resupplyable air supply, gang, you're not going to be able to stay in the fire long. And I can tell you this, the folks that are counting on you to rescue them, they don't have on bunking gear. They don't have on an SCBA. They've been trained like you're trained. They're not going to have a prayer if you can't actually get to where they are and get them out. And so, gang, that's what we're on about. Enough from us. Let's start in with our conversation, and we're going to go to the Windy City. And our brother from Chicago Fire, Jimmy Davis. Jimmy, I got a little bit of a bio here, just so you folks know. Jimmy's riding rigs today, so there's every chance that he'll get called out on something, and we'll just pick up with him a little bit later. 30-year veteran of the Chicago Fire Department, assigned to Engine Company 43, serving Logan Square. Is that correct, my man?
Yeah, Mike, you're doing good, man. You're doing good.
Moment of praise for them. Jimmy teaches all over the country. He was on the FSRI or FSRI UL technical panel for the study of fire dynamics and firefighting tactics. He writes the articles. He teaches the classes. He was highly reviewed. Really well reviewed at our Fire in the Sky class, so much that we're bringing him back. We're bringing him back for another round. So, Jimmy, we were really excited to have you be a part of this supplement. And Jimmy did an article on a topic that was really near and dear to my heart. I was very desirous that we get this topic into our study. The title he chose is Operational Burdens: The Impact a Firefighter's Stairwell Ascends at High-Rise Fires. Let me put that in dumb truck captain language. It is bloody hell tough to haul all this stuff upstairs, and it has an impact on our old bodies and young bodies, even younger bodies. Jimmy set out to talk about and write about some of those impacts on firefighters in trying to get our equipment, our air, and our life-saving skills and techniques up into big heights and across long distances. And so, Jimmy, welcome to the show, my man. Glad to have you along for the ride, brother.
Cap, great. Thanks for having me with that too. And I had a lot of fun, researching that and looking and diving a little bit deeper into that subject, because I don't think we do enough discussion on things in the fire service. Well, let me retract on that. I think we talk about the perfect world, right? Specifically of high-rise firefighting, the perfect world of things. And I'm going to tell you what, it isn't that perfect, right? And there's many hard realities with this, Mike, a lot of hard realities. So this is just one area of many areas to discuss and talk about. And what prompted me to write this and examine it a little bit further was I've seen it. I've been there. I've watched it. And guess what? This old man had to carry a bunch of crap up too. You know, it's not fun. Not fun whatsoever.
Yeah, well, let's put you right into the middle of it, old man. Okay. What's going through your mind when you're rolling in? You got a rockin' fire up in the sky, whatever it is, 5, 8, 10, 12, 20, go as high as you want to go. What's going through your mind when you hear on the radio report, the elevators are out? What's going through your mind?
It's like one of these. I tell you what, that is probably one of the worst things at a high-rise response is to have that, right? That the elevators are out. Well, why are they out? Let's try it one more time, give them the benefit of doubt. Sometimes elevator recall is operator error in some regards, but if we're talking from the context of totally being out of service, my next question, Mike, is what floor do we have to climb up to? What floor? There's a big difference between climbing up to the 5th story, and I think we're all capable of doing that. 7th story, yeah, we're doing pretty good at that. We're talking climbs that are above 12 stories, like that the article illustrated. And when I was doing this, been actually seeing it from experience, there's drop-off points. There is a point where we're doing things that most human beings are not capable of doing. And I always reference that too as Olympic athletes. If you read the article, can you imagine carrying up that barbell? Yeah. 135 pounds. Now I want you to bring that barbell up to the 27th floor for a fire. Not too many people can do that. Matter of fact, I don't think anyone's going to be able to do that without stopping, catching a breather, resetting themselves, and do it all over again. Because the impact of that on the human body, man, not only that from cardiovascular, but also the heat stressors, in which I talked about. I think we'll talk about that a little bit more, what's going on with the body, which gave me the green light or the light bulb in my head is that, there are different response models, but specifically looking at lighter equipment for doing that. And I know we talk about air bottles, and I know that you are going to need a crap load, right? A crap load of breathing cylinders at a good rock 'em and sock 'em slugfest with a high-rise fire. Now, if those bottles aren't getting there, what do you think? And I'm going to throw that as a question. How do you think your operation is going to go?
It's not going to go well.
No, it isn't. And what do we need at a fire? We need breathable air.
Well, Jimmy, we've seen that. I mean, we've seen that writ large across our careers, have we not? I mean, talk to one of the things that just drives me nuts is a lot of the people talking about air, especially in the code world. I'm not sure what fires they're going to, because they're, the response is, well, we'll just, we'll bring our own air and we'll go out and get it at the rigs. And like, what are you talking about? we're up in the air. We just we hauled our butts up 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 15 floors, coming back down to go find air. Give me a break, man. And listen, wouldn't you agree? I mean, I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble here. Have you not cut corners at big fires as it pertains to air because you've been up high enough and there hasn't been air there? Because I have. I know what that's like to not have sufficient air, but want to continue the search, to want to get a floor up. And we have cut corners. And what that means is we take the hit. We take the smoke. We take the hit.
And Mike, that's a great point, too, is that you're in the point where guys are going to end up overextending themselves. And that also is another layer of discussion and another subject of lost, all right, disorientated firemen, man. That's common. If you go back in all the case histories, and I'm a case history nerd, right? You got to go back into the past to know the future, right? When you learn from these high-rise incidents, like I said, not the perfect world. This is stuff that's going to go down, man. All right, I've read it and I've seen it. That's one of the things listed. Lost, disoriented, out of air. Those are the big three when you got a confined area of a high rise where you can't just stick your head out the 80th floor window and say, I need a breather.
Right.
I got to take a duck for a minute. Can't open the window, and then the longer that fire burns, now you're talking about smoke saturation throughout the building. Where are you going to find a place to breathe air, clean air? It goes on. One compartment opens to another, into another, and another when we talk about high rises. But I'm telling you, those that are listening to that, go and see the case studies. And there will be a point when you're reading this, it's almost with accuracy and predictability, you know what comes next. Why? Because I've read this book. I've read the book.
Yep. So your article in the supplement talks about the vertical response time as well as primary and secondary reflex. Can you explain that to our audience?
No, I'd love to. That vertical response time refers nothing more than less than cap is. We call it reflex time, but that is kind of a very loose terminology because we say reflex time. I says, what if we were to take this and get some really good time measurements? Vertical response time, when we look at that in the context of that, that's the time you get the alarm, time you get in the rig, put on all your gear, lights and sirens, speed into this fire. Or did I say that? Getting there as fast as possible, safely, all right? Walking through the doors, getting up there, whatever the mode of ascent, and applying water on the fire. And we're looking right now, and again, getting our information from past fires, we're looking at about the 18-minute mark before things start really going pretty south on you and pretty quick. If we're not getting water on the fire at about that 18-minute mark, oh, I tell you what, that is opening up a whole can of worms of problems to come. But a lot of them are going to be foreseeable if we're outside that benchmark. And how did we come up with this, Cap? That vertical response, case studies, timelines, putting it all together. So we have vertical response. Then let's talk about what is a primary reflex time. So we're giving it a little bit more terminology so people can understand this. That's the point of time on your high-rise response when you walk through that door, all right, go through the lobby, mode of ascend, either the elevator or the stairs, all right, stretching and getting water on the fire. That's primary. Primary is so important to get water on that fire. Water on fire at a high rise stops the assault of smoke on fire, all right? And where are people dying? They're dying remote from it, and they're dying from smoke. So we'll pause there. Let's get into secondary because this is where it has the substance. The secondary reflex is your, oh, thank God my help has arrived. All right, these are the guys that are going to support the incident. These are the guys that are bringing up additional air bottles, everything that we're going to need, and most importantly is relief. What's the manpower? If I just slugged it out for 15 minutes, man, and my bells are going off, then my mask sucks to my face. I go down a floor or two to change a bottle, man. Where's the bottles? Oh, they're stuck climbing the stairs. Why? Because the elevator went out. Oh, you got to be kidding me. And we're not talking 5 or 10 stories. We're talking 27, 25. Do you know how long that's going to take our guys to get there? So I would say primary, water on fire during that primary, but that secondary, you need relief and you need air.
You're muted, Mike. You're muted.
I could spend the whole rest of the segment going on and on about how badly we need air. That's obviously near and dear to my heart, but we need to talk about other things. But I hope everybody heard that. I hope you heard it loud and clear. Air resupply is going to be crucial to getting in, staying in, and doing our attack. Let's talk about, in the context of not just air, Jimmy, Let's talk about getting up those stairs. So you wrote in your article, I thought brilliantly, you talked about the impact and the implications of using the stairwell. So we know the elevators are going to fail on average. How often in a high-rise fire typically? I know it's a rough estimate. Half the time,
Yeah.
Is that fair?
If not, depending on the age and the vintage and what era that elevator, because they don't, when a building undergoes a retrofit, they'll get newer elevators. But, you can't come in there and say, hey, you know what, we're going to make you put in new elevators. It ain't happening, man. It ain't happening. Your elevator failure time is in relation or closest to the fire. That could be 15 to 20 minutes. When we look at residential pre-75 grandfather buildings, those have a higher incidence of failure rates in these buildings, and those are the ones that concern me. These modern high-rises, even in commercial buildings, they have a little bit more leeway. But in these residential buildings, man, and I've seen them, they don't last long, especially when you start flowing water near and around elevators, man, you lose them. I've seen a lot of things, and thinking, even opening up your nozzle, your pipe into an elevator shaft, to validate your pressures and that. Just as something as subtle as that could have the potential to knock out your elevators. And I tell you what, you won't have many friends down in that lobby. He says, what happened? Such and such, sprayed, devalidated his lines, put all this water down the elevator, man. You're not going to have many friends with that, too. So we need to really safeguard. I know what we do in our department. I hope other departments are hearing me and say that is 2 words: maximize the elevator. We got to recall, we put in phase 2, all that heavy equipment, man, bring it up on the first car. Even if you got to stand on it, be smart about it. There are load limits, but you got to get the heavy stuff up there, because eventually or sooner or later, and I don't know when, don't have the crystal ball, we're going to lose that elevator. And that may be the only elevator you have. There's other buildings with other banks that are farther remote. But I'm talking your worst case scenario, elevation in relation to the closest distance to that fire. You're going to lose it. That's gold. And I've seen these go anywhere out from 5 minutes to 20 minutes into a fire. And you hope you get everybody up there, and the things that you need in a protracted high rise are there and available. And that's what you hope for. That's what you pray for.
And very honestly, Jimmy, and nobody talks about this, and units getting trapped in the elevators when they do go out of service, what that's going to take away from you. Mm-hmm. I know a couple of cases in my career where second due trucks, second due engine, even the first due sometimes got trapped in the elevator. And now they had to force their way out to try. And then, and again, the elevator's between floors. You're not climbing out before you shut the power off. You got to send somebody up to the roof to shut the power off. So somebody's got to go all the way to the roof or wherever the elevated machinery room is. So there are so many different things to think about on this thing.
Oh, and I tell you, Cap, that's your worst case scenario too, is that you lose. And I'm talking your primary reflex. First two companies walk through the doors as things are going great. You get stuck in the elevator for some reason. Maybe phase 2 wasn't working, or the call, whatever the case would be, it's a failure. All right. Just think that now what they did to your vertical response time. Now you got a whole company that's stuck in that elevator too. You want to talk about tanking your incident, man? That's one great example, Cap.
Absolutely, Jimmy. And I've seen it happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, we got to remember, if nothing else, we're talking about an electronic box controlled by a computer in a building that's on fire, right? You can expect you're going to lose them. So, Jimmy, talk about. I'm gonna try to plug in my main line here. Talk about the implications of using the stairwell. So we're using it now. What are some of the implications for us as firefighters as we start to make that climb?
The weight of the equipment carried, the age of the person carrying that equipment, all right, the age, and then the, of course, physical conditioning of that fireman. There's a big difference between a 56-year-old male carrying stuff and a 20-something-year-old guy too. There's going to be a big difference, but mostly the impact is going to see what was going to be how much weight you're carrying up. Let's talk about. I find this interesting of what it's doing to the body. Climbing these stairs with all this weight on you. And that weight, again, I illustrated, could be up to 135 pounds. It could be 100 pounds. It depends on what you're bringing up and what your response model looks like. Let's talk about cardiovascular events. And I just want to talk to it. We had that line of duty death 2 years ago in a high-rise fire. And it was just an opportunity to realize is that we may be in a position to affect outcomes if we have ALS gear. Let's say we lose a fireman goes down in cardiac arrest. And I'm telling you, your heartbeat is 180 to 200 beats per minute. When we get a fireman down in cardiac arrest, what do? We need the equipment up there. I would recommend, man, I tell you, just as important as the hose and bringing the air bottles, how many departments bring up an automatic external defibrillator up with them? That's for us. Right, if we lose a fireman, or if that's for us, if it goes down, fireman goes down, it's much easier to bring the defibrillator down as it is to climb. Right, so you have it there. It won't take you to jiffy, especially knowing firemen. Got a fireman down, they're there like this, man. They're there like that. Right, and then secondly, what are the provisions that you have for ALS equipment? Are we bringing up? Where are the paramedics at? Where are they staging it? We need their drug box. We need all this stuff because we have to work the down firemen where we find effective CPR, effective ventilations, and then again with the advanced cardiac drugs. That's something you need to think. We don't think about that. What if the fireman goes down walking the stairs and what it's doing to the body? You not only mentioned that heartbeat, guess what's happening to your core? Your core temperature is rising. You got all this gear on. You can't dissipate the heat that's being generated. You can't. It's all being bottled up for you. So we can do that. My heart is going as fast as it can. Plus, I'm being cooked by like a baked potato. Right? These are serious implications on the body. The body isn't designed for that. So I said and showed a couple response models when we're talking climbing stairs with bringing the hose up. It's just one of them, the different ways. But I'm going to tell you what, you got to come up light. Mike and I talked about that. The factors is the amount of weight of the equipment carried up. All right. That's a huge game changer. We have to look in ways, and I'm going to say two things. We have to look at lighter equipment. All right, specifically for high-rise vertical operations. It's out there. Secondly, I'm going to add one more too. Wouldn't it be nice to have in a code for any tall or large building being built is that you have a standpipe of air, a fire system in it? That you have some way, you know what, my secondary reflex is not coming up here, but I need to get bottles filled right away. Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be great if we had that in some type of a code or requirement? We're not there yet. And I want to talk about the third thing, too, is elevators. Mike, you talked about that. A metal electronic box that's highly affected by water. How come we're not putting in, all right, the FASE, the fire service elevators? Shouldn't we have at least one? I'm saying not give us all of them, but just give us one. So that's a hardened elevator, which is not susceptible to the failure rates of that compared to a different elevator, man. But we need some things in our court. We need to have a hand that's workable and possibly winnable.
And you know, the other thing, Jimmy, that I found, and it's personal, but I found this years ago when we first went in the FDNY to bunker gear. It's December, January. I always wore turtlenecks when I went to work in the fire department because we were wearing the rubber boots and the three-quarter coats. So you wanted to be warmed up. Okay. Well, the first time I climbed 20 stories in my with my air pack on, and I couldn't wait to get after that fire to rip that turtleneck off. I just ripped it and destroyed the turtleneck because I couldn't get the heat out of my body. One of the things you have to think about, you going into this, is what you are wearing under your bunker gear to allow yourself to breathe. If it's in the middle of winter and you've got on a t-shirt, a long sleeve t-shirt, and then a sweatshirt over it, and now you're climbing 15, 16 stories, the sweat, the heat that your body's going to maintain there is going to be extremely dangerous to your core. So all of these things are part of it.
And Mike, do I get a second to talk about that implication? I just want to talk about even if, all right, let's say you started off with 50 firemen, all right, and they had to climb up, let's say, to a fire on the 32nd floor. You started with 50, you got maybe 10 guys on the floor, 8 to 10 guys. Do you think that's enough people to mount an organized, coordinated fire attack when half of your, if not 3/4 of the other firemen are on lower floors? And what happens in a real high rise, they start shedding gear, right? What they started with is not what's brought up with. You will see littering in stairways, hose pack drop here, a bottle laying here, a bunker coat up on the next floor. I've seen guys that come up and they're just wearing their shirt. They look like me. They look like me. They had to drop the weight because they were physically incapable of getting up those stairs.
Yep. When we
need
climb,
bottles, and we need the bottles, and they're laying and they're littered in a stairwell.
when we climbed 50 floors in the first bombing of the World Trade Center, the senior man in my company used to smoke 3 packs of Luckies a day. And he said he left a hunk of Harlem on the odd floors and a piece of gear on all the even floors. And he made the 50-story climb.
Yeah.
It took him 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Mike, are you going to talk about the climbing rates or what at least studies show? Is that was one of the other questions, correct?
Well, we'll let them read that, Jimmy, I think.
Yeah.
We're in pretty good shape here with your stuff. And since you're on duty, we'll kind of go into something else. So we've been at this for a while so far. So listen, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great article. It's a great thing. There will be a link available on this, I think, to get to it. Correct, Michael?
Yep. We'll give you a link to the copy, the electronic version. And you can answer all the questions. We just wanted to prime the pump a little bit here, let you hear Jimmy talk about it. It's such a brilliant article, and we can probably move on to article number 2. Jimmy, thank you, man.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, man, the alarm gods were kind. Holy smokes!
Woo. How about after midnight? Yeah, after midnight. I hope it's that way. Yeah. But I'm going to listen in, guys. Thank you, Mike. Guys, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for having me on.
And Jimmy, now you're not going to be able to get through any meals. The alarm gods are going to take it out on you. So, all right, brother, thank you.
Well, moving on to the next article topic. Mike, am I coming through okay?
Yeah.
Loud and clear? All right, good. We're for the listeners, I'm working with a new computer, and so this is my first webcast with this new computer. I'm sorting it out. One of the other articles that we did, I'm gonna kind of fun because I get to feature my co-host here, which is fun for me. We did a collaboration between Mike Dugan and Tom Merrill. We're very interested at the Air Coalition about fires in large structures. And Tom and Mike have been doing an incredible amount of research on big box fires, whether it's, warehouses or shipping centers or big office complexes or those types of things. And they did an article called Coming to a Town Near You. Now, you're all very familiar with my co-host, Michael Dugan. Not a whole lot in the fire service Mike hasn't done. Tom Merrill is a 42-year, holy smokes. What did you start when you were like 6, brother? Yikes, man. 42-year fire department veteran, serves with the Snyder Fire Department, which is located in Amherst, New York. 26 years as a fire department officer. He's the chief of the department from 2007 to 2012. Again, has taught all over the country, is becoming world famous now. World famous for his fire engineering book, The Professional Volunteer Fire Department. I can tell you, I have a copy. It's been so wonderfully reviewed. I mean, making a significant impact all over the place. So I guess I'm going to ask the questions here because it's my co-host and co-author, Tom Merrill. Let's talk about the article Coming to a Town Near You. Tom, let me start with you. All right. Talk about a brief history of big box stores and how our shopping habits seem to be changing, and why fire departments, big and small, right? I mean, FD&Y size all the way down to the smallest departments in the nation are all of a sudden having to deal with these big buildings.
Absolutely. You know, I was just in Michigan last weekend, and I'm driving along the highway. The chief of the department in Lapeer, Michigan, picked me up and is driving me to a conference. And there we are on the highway, and all of a sudden I look over to my right, and there's this huge, humongous complex being built. And it's one of the big box structures, and it's coming up in their backyard. They are springing up everywhere. And so big box, first off, is a term that we use to describe very large commercial facilities or warehouses, and they're used to store all sorts of products that are awaiting distribution throughout a region. All sorts of stuff, right? And what type of stuff? Well, think of what you have in your home. Think of what you have in your business. Think about what you need day in and day out to do what you do. That stuff. It's got to be stored somewhere. And there's definitely been an explosive growth in these stores and the warehouses that store the stuff. And this has been driven in part by a change in consumer shopping habits that was pushed along certainly by the COVID pandemic for certain, because that obviously forced people to do more from home, to do more online shopping. But it did, at the same time, I think it aligned closely with a lot of closings of the traditional brick and mortar mom and pop type stores. And that was coming about because e-commerce was starting to take off and was becoming so convenient, better managed, and just made it so easy to order things online from the convenience of your home. So the consumers certainly love to do that. It might have moved along faster because of COVID, but basically they learned right away, shoot, anything I want's one click away. It'll be here tomorrow, and it's never out of stock. And along with that, you got suburbs that are expanding. There's large plots of land available, which can be purchased relatively cheap. So that made it easy to build not just the warehouses, but these big box stores. So it's just been a big, big boom. And it's not slowing down. That's for certain. Like I said, when I was in Michigan, boom, there's one right off the highway there. And if you want to see how many there are, all you have to do, and Mike Dugan pointed this out, is type into your phone, your search bar, whatever you use, how many big box stores or how many big box warehouses or how many big box structures are near me, and you would be amazed at what you see. Right, Mike? You told me that one.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Mikey, as I read through the article, you identified in the opening segment two primary types. Yep. I know there's a wide variety, but if you want to narrow it down to the bigger categories, talk about the two primary types of big box that folks are going to have to deal with.
Yeah, it's going to be a big box type of store is one. It's a big box. It's a Home Depot, Costco, Walmart. They're stores. They're selling stuff. They have people in there. They have customers in there. They have employees in there. And those big box warehouse type stores, their minimum size for them to be considered a big box is 200,000 square feet, up to about 650 to 750,000 square feet. That's for a store. And then the other one you have is the warehouses, where they store all this stuff for e-commerce stuff. That's kind of like a fulfillment center. And those are usually anywhere from 600,000 square feet to over 1 million square feet. And they go in these areas where land is cheap. And it's not just in rural areas. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he's got Amazon. Right now, he's working with Amazon on structures in New York City, and they have, I think, about 28 or 29 different structures that Amazon owns just in New York City. And, they own them outside of New York City. They're all over the place. They want a couple of things when they buy these things: cheap property, access to highways, and they also want an area, if they can, where there's less regulation. New York City's got a tough building code. Dallas probably has a tough building code. Seattle probably has a tougher building code. The thing with this is they want areas where they don't have the regulations. New York City in these buildings requires specific things: fire safety directives, communication systems, and all this other stuff, which they say adds to the cost. They don't want to do that. So if they can be outside someplace with less restrictions, they're going to go there.
Mike, isn't it also true? I've communicated with a lot of fire marshals in these smaller areas. One of the ways that the developers and the builders get around requirements is this idea of, hey, we're bringing capital into the area. We're bringing jobs into the area, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's taxes. So they're going to give them a tax break in the beginning. Right. Some of these places need tax breaks, like I need a hole in the head. Yeah. But again, it's what happens. It's municipal. It's money. They're making deals. So it's a lot. You have to look at what's going up around you. And, it's vitally important. It's vitally important that if it's coming to you, if it's coming to your area, you get a seat at the table. Our joke is, if you don't get a seat at the table, you're on the menu. And we have been to a couple of places where they have been very, very proactive and said, okay, you're going to put this in here. There are certain things we want. We don't have a ladder truck to reach the top of the roof of this building. We need a ladder truck. All right, we'll have to get you a ladder truck, whatever it is. One of the things that we found later that nobody even thought of was the idea of time off for drilling. These things work 24/7, 365. If you do not hold their feet to the fire before you issue a CO, a certificate of occupancy, and say that I want certain things, I want time, I want 4 hours a year, 2-hour drill times where you close down so we can do a walkthrough and go through there where it's not running. Then I want to be able to come in at other times for just a familiarization while it's still running, but I can walk my people and just show them. If you don't do this, then you come up and say, oh, we want to come through and do a drill on this place. Oh, sorry, we can't accommodate that because we're working 24/7. We can't accommodate that. You have to get yourself involved in this.
Yeah, I think so, Mike. What you're going into there would lead into my third question, and I'll have both you and Tom comment. Tom, go ahead. Pre-planning is essential. I really what jumped out when I read the article, Mike, you hit it, was you got to have a seat at the table, or you're just going to get run over. And remember, Tom, you can speak to this in specific. Not every fire department is bringing FDNY or Chicago Fire or Dallas Fire staffing. And so, speak to pre-planning, Tom, and Mike, pipe in as appropriate.
It's funny, I think why am I with this esteemed group? I'm a proud volunteer firefighter, have been for decades. And what I like to say to the group is a lot of these types of structures, if they're not already there, but they're coming to areas protected by primarily volunteer departments in many cases because the land is so plentiful and so cheap. So volunteers really need to be aware that these are springing up in their backyard if they haven't already. And pre-planning is so important. Because if you're not ready to operate in one of these buildings and talk about it and plan ahead of time, then you're going to have a big problem when that emergency call comes in. And remember, it's not always fires. We're not just talking about fires. Even a medical call in these buildings can be tough to deal with. Where in the building is the person? Is there a particular door we need to use to get inside to where that person is? So there's a lot of challenges with these buildings. And the one thing I like to say is we can't get complacent. It's so easy for complacency to filter through the ranks, especially people think, oh, well, they're brand new, so they're sprinklered. They have sprinkler systems. They have fire department connections. They're made of masonry, concrete. They're not going to burn. Well, read the article because we list several recent incidents where they have burned and caused significant damage. So there have been serious fires at these complexes. So pre-planning is huge, and you want to do it before the emergency call comes in. And as Captain Dugan said, even before the shovel hits the ground, you need to have a seat at the table. And I know pre-planning is usually not one of the exciting things that the chief likes to do. It's not at the top of the to-do list. And in the volunteer ranks, you've got so many other things you're balancing that it gets pushed down quite often. But it's got to be done, and the time is now to figure out how you're going to be ready. And another great quote from Captain Dugan, and I love to say it, is proper pre-planning prevents poor performance. So good pre-planning can make the difference between success and failure. And I mean, think about just a normal sized building and the challenges that come with that. Well, these aren't normal sized buildings. So it's crucial. You got to think to yourself, okay, where do we begin? And you mentioned it earlier. I think there's three big areas to start with. And you mentioned it. You mentioned water. You mentioned air. You mentioned people. You got to have people. So think to yourself, how many are coming on our normal first alarm assignment? How many can we count on from neighboring departments? How many neighboring departments might we need to tone out for an emergency in these particular buildings, and plan ahead for that? If you think you can handle it yourself, you're probably mistaken, because we're not FDNY staffed or Chicago staffed, and you're going to need water. What type of hydrant system is supplying that building? Where are the hydrants? Where are the fire department connections? Are the hydrants looped? Are they dead end? I think there's an example, Captain Dugan, you might be able to talk about that. There was an example somewhere where the line was a dead end line, and they tapped into it and they robbed water from the suppression system in the building. Did they not?
Correct. That was in California.
Yeah.
It was a yard system around the system, but it dead ended, and they tapped into the yard system. And then they took all of the water away from the sprinkler system. Right.
Yeah. So maybe some good pre-planning ahead of time might have helped with that they would have realized maybe what the situation was there. And, I think it's good to know where the fire hydrants are. And even if they're yard hydrants, or are they, private yard hydrants or municipal hydrants, because there's a difference sometimes in how those are operated and maintained. And then the other thing to think about, and you hit it, is air. What's the air situation? If we get a seat at the table ahead of time, maybe we can talk to them about putting in an air replenishment system, because you're probably not going to be able to retrofit the building after it's been constructed. But it is something that a seat at the table. If you have a seat at the table, you can talk to them about, hey, we need to plan for how we're going to get air to our firefighters to take care of the fire incident in the building if it's a fire incident. So let's talk about that. Here's what we're going to need. At least you tried to make that point, and maybe you'll get a fire air replenishment system in the building. Mike, what else do you think we should talk about with pre-planning? We could go on and on with that subject.
Go on and on, and we could talk for hours about this. But there are three phases of pre-planning you have to be involved in the fire department. The first page is pre-construction, what you're going to want there. Construction, how they're going to do it, what you want for the building. Then is during construction, and we'll go into this a little more with Chief DeYear in a little while when he's talking about the city that came. But you're going to have construction workers, hundreds of them, working on this building, completely going around. So you got to have a plan for that. Where are you going to get in? What's going to be the access point? Are there roads? Can I get my rigs in there? What am I going to do? And then when it's finally staffed, what's going on? You have to know what you're going to require. Some of the codes in some of these places don't even require one-way voice communication, which is a PA system, to make announcements to the workers what's going on. Now, the problem is in a lot of these places, the workers come in and they are required to leave their cell phones at their locker. So they don't have any communication. They don't want them scrolling on their phones during work hours. Understood. But there has to be a way to communicate to these people. And that's one of the things that they're looking at now after that one with the tornado that was in Illinois. It killed 6 people. So these are things we have to think about. And you have to get yourself involved in this.
Mike, we emphasize the pre-planning. So hopefully we've got a seat at the table. We've got a good plan going in, but a plan only gets you so far. You actually have to train to the plan, right? You got to put some elbow grease and some time, effort, and energy into training to the plan. So talk about just some ideas of key places fire departments have to train to be ready for what's probably going to be the biggest fire of the department's life. What are a few areas in your article that you folks emphasized?
Well, you have to train the standard of what are you going to do with this fire? If there are people there, if there are people in the building, what are you going to do? Are you using search ropes? What's your search rope procedure? Is it the same for everyone? Do all your mutual aid companies know what your search rope procedure is? Are your search ropes marked? Do we know what unit brought that search rope? Was it engine 1 or engine 4? Was it truck 1 or truck 3? All of these things are part of it. Where are you going to put your people? Where are you getting your water from? Your water has to be a trained thing. Where all the water is coming from has to be we have to train on this. The one place I know of, they had a yard hydrant system, and the chief demanded, and they put in 2 1 million gallon holding tanks of water because the local water mains were not big enough to supply the fire department and the sprinkler system to the building. So he required that before you would sign off on a C of O. So your training has to include everything. And all of these intermesh, your training, your pre-planning, all of these have to work together towards the same thing, to make your people as safe as possible,
Tom, anything to add to that from your perspective? Especially, you're talking a lot to lighter staff jobs, and people who have second and third jobs, not just the fire department, right?
Yep. And I coach that little league team, or I got to travel this weekend for my travel hockey or whatever it is, right? Yeah, it's a balancing act. But no, the thing that I like to always remind people is you have to, and I know we've said it a few times, but you have to include your mutual aid partners. They have to be part of the training process so they know what they're getting into, so they know what's expected of them. And it's not a one and done either. This isn't something you're going to do once and okay, we're all set. Everybody knows. I mean, we have members come and go. So you want to bring new members up to speed, as well as muscle memory makes things better. So everyone, if your veteran members go through it, great. They're refreshing their memory, and same with your neighboring departments. So you need to train with your mutual aid departments. It needs to be regular training, and it's tough. As the captain said earlier, they're 24/7, 365 operations. They might not want the fire department coming through there. Okay, the 4th of July is available. Maybe they shut down then, or Christmas week. Well, it's not the best time for us, maybe, especially in the volunteer ranks. So work that out ahead of time. And another thing to think about, folks, is there's a lot of machinery in these buildings. And you really should have a basic understanding of how that machinery works. You got robots zipping around getting product A to deliver to point B, and they're not going to pay any attention to you if you happen to get in their way. So you need to understand how those robots work, how the machinery works, and maybe if there's steps that we need to know or understand on how to shut them down or stay out of their way. And there's a lot of intricate equipment in these facilities, and you can't bury your head in the sand and then think you'll worry about it if and when that emergency call comes in. You got to plan ahead, and then you got to drill and train and train again.
You know, it's in listening to you guys, I could just hear fire service leadership going, holy crap, man, we got some terrible stuff coming our way. And when our buddy Daniel DeYear here talks about his article, which goes into a specific place where one of these actually showed up. Mike, Tom, how about some words of encouragement for folks who have these structures coming in?
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, well, first of all, I think it's important to note that it doesn't just apply to big city departments. This is a situation that's occurring around the country in cities, yes, big department protected, yes, but also in small towns and rural villages that are protected by small volunteer departments. They're springing up. So, a serious topic that applies equally across the board to firefighters everywhere. And if you're not ready to operate, well, guess what? You're going to have a problem. So have a plan, put the resources in place, come up with your standard procedures, and be ready, because these stores and these warehouses are continuing to be built at an incredibly fast pace, because they do conform to building codes and that. Like I said, people think I don't have to worry about it, but you do have to, because recent history has proven that they can and they will burn. So department leadership needs to ensure that they have a seat at the table from the very beginning, and the time is now, before the shovel hits the ground, to start planning for a big box warehouse or big box store if it's coming to a town near you, and it probably will be if it's not already. Cap?
And I just think, listen, phone a friend. There are men, chiefs in different departments throughout the country who have dealt with this. And you can hold them up to either be a good example or a bad example. But either way, you can hold them up to be something, okay? And that is what you're going to want to do with your job, okay? What you're going to want to do with your stuff, okay? Thank you.
All right. Well, guys, thanks very much. We're going to use that to kind of prime the pump a little bit. And your article title, Coming to a Town Near You, I thought was a brilliant title. And then our next guest, Chief Daniel DeYear, retired out of Dallas Fire after an illustrious 45-year career that actually isn't over yet. Daniel's still trucking. But he came to me with an idea of talking about an actual incident, an actual intrusion of a big box structure into a smaller department. Tom, something that'll be near and dear to your heart. And he entitled his article, Instant City, Meeting Service Demand and the Need to Breathe. And we're going to take you folks now to Taylor, Texas. Daniel, talk to us about, first off, let's prime the pump. Tell us about your experience in these types of structures. And, it helps when you're writing an article to have some experience. Just go through a little bit of your experience in 45 years of going to these large types of fires.
Well, so I have experience at every rank, everywhere from rookie firefighter to driver engineer to company officer, truck company captain, battalion chief, deputy chief. In Dallas, we clearly have a ton of high rises and a ton of big box construction as well, a lot of big warehouses. We've had quite a few fires over the years in these warehouses. They've been daunting, to say the least, just for the sheer manpower that's required. Also, depending on what's stored in those occupancies, range from chemicals for pools to office space, automobile parts. Matter of fact, one of the more significant fires I had years ago was the U.S. Mail Postal Center, the right. Central Distribution Center in Dallas. Ironically, there's a web of conveyor belts that look like almost I would call it a roller coaster. If you look at a roller coaster, it's what these conveyor belts look like. They went all over this entire warehouse, moving mail and moving parcels. which every one of us in the fire service know that the U.S. Postal Service is the #1 hazardous materials carrier in the country. So what's even in those boxes and envelopes and packs of mail, we have no idea. Well, one of those boxes had caught on fire and literally traveled the entire distance of the building, dropping flaming debris all over the warehouse and set probably 8 or 9 fires in different locations, just because of the uniqueness of it. But it wasn't so much the fire load that was the concern. It was just the sheer size of the building. I mean, the amount of time it took for our folks to get in there. This was a 24-hour-a-day mail center, so it was an occupied structure. So in order to get a primary search, it took numerous companies to get in there. They were running out of air before they got very far into the building. Once the fire was under control, it took hours to basically ventilate the building and conduct a secondary search. So the size is just enormous. And I heard you make that comment earlier, and to Mike Dugan's credit as well. I mean, we come from departments where we can easily ask for 5 more engines and 5 more trucks and get it in a reasonable period of time. But that's not typical America. That doesn't exist. We put more people on a 1-alarm working fire in a 1,500 square foot house than many fire departments even employ or can put on the scene to any kind of fire. So we have a luxury to that. But yeah, those buildings, the biggest takeaway is extremely labor intensive. There's no way the fire attack can occur with just a handful of folks. There's no way search can be done with just a handful of folks. And then when the fire is finally over, or even if the fire suppression system or the sprinkler system kept the fire in check, to do the overhaul is going to take hours and hours, and just to get the building ventilated. It's just, now you see these super fans. Dallas owns one of those gigantic fans mounted on the back of a flatbed trailer. But even with those fans, you're still looking at sometimes 45 minutes to an hour and a half to get the building pressurized and to get the smoke out of there. So it's just very, very labor intensive.
Yeah. And I mean, you're going to need the people. And again, all of these things tie together. And that's one of the things about this supplement that was so beautiful, that they all tie together. But the thing that's very important about that is you're going to have the people. You got to have the training and the volunteers. You got to know who's coming, who's responding, what's going on. You and I and Mike come from the cities where we can get this. We can get more people. But if you're in a small volunteer community, I know a couple of them who've gone into very, very small volunteer communities. You've got to have the automatic mutual aid and everything else. So in your article, you talk about instant city. Tell us what you mean when you say instant city. So
if in New York City or Dallas, we were to put 10,000 people in one place, it happens all the time. It wouldn't even disrupt the city.
A Knicks game.
Yeah, it doesn't disrupt our services. But in a community of 19,000 people, all of a sudden, if you put 10 more thousand people in one specific location, that they don't have the police department, the infrastructure, the traffic, they probably don't have enough electricity and water and sanitation to take care of that. And what I meant by instant city is most of the people in the Texas area, at least, knew that Samsung had chosen Taylor, Texas, to be the site of their what now is a $36 or $38 billion construction project, literally building, I think, 11 million square feet of office and warehouse space. They knew it was coming to their community, but what caught everybody a little bit off guard is the fact that literally overnight in a vacant field, the construction trailers started to show up, just like any other construction project or any other housing development. Like where I live, but once upon a time it was a field, and one construction trailer showed up and they started carving streets and pouring concrete and putting utilities in. Well, what happened in Taylor is that construction site ended up being 10,000 people within a very, very short period of time in an area where there was literally no service for anything. There was no water service, no sanitation, no electricity. And the construction trailers started showing up, not by the dozens, but by the hundreds. Matter of fact, some of them were so big that the fire code was requiring them to be sprinklered. You don't see too many construction trailers anywhere that are required by the fire code to have a sprinkler system, and they have several of those. So just and then to the people that live and work in that community, all of a sudden now they're facing a challenge that they've never seen before. Like you said, you put 10,000 people at a Knicks game, or you put 30,000 people at a Yankees game, or 80,000 people, it doesn't make a difference. Doesn't make a difference in Dallas either. But you can bet in a community with only 19,000 full-time residents that typically leave the community during the day and commute into the greater Austin area, it's really a rural bedroom community that's been growing. They've had a tremendous number of challenges, and they've rose to every occasion, and they're fantastic fire department, but they're not, just like most fire departments in this country, they're not geared towards the mass instant city that happened overnight.
So let me just, surely, Daniel, when an 11 million square foot business property comes in and all that revenue and everything, surely when they build these things, the business owners agree ahead of time to add more members to the fire department and build new firehouses, right? Isn't that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Isn't that a standard accepted thing?
Yeah, they gave him a raise too. No, unfortunately, you talk about mutual aid, what's unique, and this is not unique to Taylor. I mean, y'all have been talking about, this is everywhere in our country today. But there's a part of me, and I'm being facetious now as well. If you and I owned a Walmart distribution center and we built it in a community that had one volunteer firehouse in the entire community, I'm thinking we're already making a conscious decision. We're writing the building off if it catches on fire, because there's no way in the world there's going. Matter of fact, you and I, Mike, know, and same thing with Mike G from Seattle. You take a lot of fire in a Costco, we're burning the building to the ground. If the sprinkler system hadn't kept it in check, we're burning it to the ground, because even our organizations don't. We can't get enough people in there that quick to actually put the fire out. But so I think in those rural areas, there's already a decision by the people building it. And I don't know if it's trying to circumvent some of the building codes possibly, or some of the fire codes, but they're not worried about how nobody's building a property in rural America right now and asking, well, what does the fire department bring to the party? To your point, nobody's sitting at that table. Nobody's even asking those questions. And Taylor, for example, they've got one engine and one ladder truck. And then they've got basically a staff chief that would respond with it. So they can put 8 people on a kitchen fire or a house fire, an apartment fire right now. But then going into Samson, we both know there's no way one engine and one ladder truck, I don't care if you're in New York City or Seattle or anywhere in between, you're not going to be able to handle the incident with 2 companies. It's just not going to happen. Right. So there's already that write-off, but Taylor, just like every other city we've talked about in this country, they're great men and women who work in an organization that know that life safety is our biggest concern. And whether the building's been written off by the owners or not, we still have a responsibility to get in there and conduct a search or get them out of the building if they're still in there. And I mean, that sits on us, because that's the oath we take. That's the product we produce and serve. So I think that's where the disconnect is in our world today, unfortunately. But as like every fire department in this country, they rise to the occasion. Right. I mean, I can tell you right now, the 3 of us, I'm looking at Seattle, New York City, and Dallas fire departments. If you gave us 1 engine, 1 truck, and just a 1 million square foot warehouse, we know we can't do it. Right. We can't do it. Yeah. But there are some communities that do. I mean, or at least make a hell of an attempt to. So I think that's you can rest assured, as forward thinking as Samson is, they did not buy a new or invest in a new fire department to respond to their property.
Well, in responding to these instant cities coming in, what are some of the challenges? Speak to the fire prevention personnel. We're gonna talk to fire prevention. We're gonna talk to ops, but let's talk about fire prevention. And Michael articulated earlier, you need a seat at the table. What are some of the challenges from the fire prevention side of things with these instant cities coming into a jurisdiction?
So from experience, and I came from the luxury of an organization that the fire prevention and the fire operations or suppression group worked well together. We all worked for the same organization. They were different career paths, but we worked together. But what I see so many times in other cities and other jurisdictions is the disconnect between what the firefighters really do and what the fire prevention people really do. In other words, I see sometimes a disconnect from somebody who isn't talking to the firefighters and or the ops chiefs and saying, hey, how does this really play out in your world? No, in other words, how important is a fire lane to a property? Well, the view looking at plans is a lot different than the view through the windshield of an engine or a truck company chauffeur that's trying to get their rig in position to fight a fire. And I don't see that communication occurring like it should. And I think, like, if you want to use Taylor as a good example, they're one organization. So their fire marshal and the fire marshal's office or the fire prevention office clearly was working with the fire chief and the ops guys so that they're all sitting at the same table. So when someone says, here's what the fire code says, somebody can also chime in and say, yeah, but that's still not really good enough for what we need on the ops end of it. And then a decision can be made and they move forward. What I see in so many other organizations is you have fire marshals or fire prevention folks who they understand that fire code, they understand the building code or the fire and life safety code, and they're following the letter of those codes. But that's not what the fire department is actually playing with. And it's certainly not what the community expects. And I'll back this up with a good example. We know this past weekend, they had a tragic fire that happened in Milwaukee. Right? There were 30 grabs, if my numbers are correct. They made at least 30 rescues, injuring numerous firefighters and killing 4 residents. If you start to read that article, it talks about the building wasn't required to have a sprinkler system because it was grandfathered. So according to the fire prevention world, we were rocking it. Fire prevention code did what it was supposed to do. It didn't apply to that building because it was grandfathered. But that didn't do any favor to the men and women that lived in that building or the men and women that had to respond to that fire. Right. So I think there's a disconnect, and I don't see a lot of discussion happening between both groups. In other words, it's easy for me to say, hey, this building isn't required to have a sprinkler system, but we all look at it from a firefighter's point of view and go, that's one we really need to have a sprinkler system in. That discussion isn't happening. And I think that's where the disconnect is right now. That's just an opinion, but that's what I've seen. Sure. Now in Taylor, that's not the case. They're rocking it in Taylor. They've talked to their surrounding mutual aid and auto assistance departments, some of which are coming from a great distance. But once again, if there's ever a tremendous incident there, they're going to be severely overtaxed, and they know that. But at least that they can get in there and get the life safety aspect of it tackled, that'll work. And just playing off of a comment somebody else made earlier, previous chief, talking about access. Samsung is a government military contract business. So even access to this property is a significant. Y'all can't just drive in there and go look at it. It's a secured facility because of the government contracts. They work with our national defense. So, the fire department, it's like going to responding to the White House or Fort Knox. The security there is insane. It's not like they can just pull in there and lay another line. That's not going to happen.
Right. You're muted, Michael. Oh,
sorry about that. Yeah, and that's so important because that also comes right back to where our next question and our last question is, because it's fire prevention, but now it's affecting operations. So fire prevention has to get the plan. We come here for an emergency. What are you going to do? You're not going to have us go through security and clear all my firemen. What are you going to do? Who's going to direct us to where we have to go in this building? And Tom Merrill talked about that with the big box warehouses. What door am I going into? Where is the report? What's the easiest access for us? Where are we going? And again, your people have to educate the people at this site, because I don't want them taking me right to the fire. I want you to tell me where the fire is and where we can get access to our area on the floor below and stage and get ready to attack the fire. I don't want you to put me in an elevator and take me to the 6th floor that's on fire. That ain't happening. So these are all things that we have to think about. But, the challenges for the operational personnel are going to be huge, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in Dallas, we've got our share of big properties. I'll use the Galleria Mall as a good example. It's just a shopping high-rise complex. But, someone called years ago and said, hey, we need an ambulance outside and learn her shoes. A lady fell. She shopped till she dropped. Send us a fire truck and ambulance. There's nobody in the Dallas Fire Department that knows where Lerner Shoes is inside the Galleria Mall, right? So we had an agreement that we would respond to one particular location, and their security team would show us the most expeditious way of getting to that part of the building and where to bring our stretcher and our firefighters. And that obviously works. And we do that in numerous buildings. So the Yankee Stadium, American Airlines Center in downtown Dallas. We have an on-site group that's there for EMS on a normal basis. But if there was a catastrophic fire or an event, somebody's going to need to tell us which doors to come in, how to access that part of the building. Section 405 isn't going to get us anywhere in the fire service, right? So that's back to the point that's already been made on this show is, the importance of that pre-fire plan. But what was always the wild card, especially the big cities like the three of us represent, it's not unusual for the first due company to sometimes be from out of district. They're filling in during a multiple alarm fire. They're not familiar with the property. They don't even know where to go. Hopefully, through today's technology with our mobile data terminals, we can have that information on a screen telling a fifth alarm engine company that's now first due, hey, here's where you need to go. Here's who you need to meet. So that's all the more importance of doing that pre-fire planning. But, you think about like Taylor as a good example. They got one engine and one truck. Well, they serve a pretty busy community. They make a lot of runs. So the chance of both of those vehicles already at another kitchen fire or car fire or an automobile accident when something goes wrong at Samsung is certainly possible. Now, all of a sudden, your mutual aid or your auto assistance department is going to be first due. And have they been pre-planning? Are they on their A game showing up? Do they know where to meet the security and how to get into the property? And that's just the challenges that we have. The bigger the building, you just amplify that. And it's not, if you double the size of the building, your problem didn't double, it probably quadrupled.
Amen.
Yeah, Daniel, in closing out this segment, our whole desire with this supplement was to present, an integrated package of, with Champo talking about fire smoke and cancer, and Jimmy Davis talking about the challenges of stairwell, Mike and Tom, kind of giving the clarion call warning that this is coming your way, and then your example of here's what it looks like when it comes your way. Any encouragement to the folks that are listening right now who know this stuff is coming? Any encouragement to them you can offer as we close this out?
I guess the best encouragement I would share is that if you're getting ready to deal with this, start asking around and looking around, because it's already been out there for a number of years. There's a lot of departments that have already had to struggle with this, and I know that's one of the things that Taylor did. Their fire chief and fire marshal are forward-thinking folks, and they were immediately talking to other organizations and departments, big and small, on how do you deal with this? What do we need to do to get ahead of this? And what can we expect? So I think that's where the hope lies, in the fact that there already is a lot of these massive construction projects, a lot of these big box buildings. And now even in some of the rural areas now, we're seeing, 4, 5, 6-story hotels or urban centers, if you would, where there's retail on the first floor and residential above. Those are coming into smaller and smaller communities now, even communities that have never had to deal with, a low rise or even a mid-rise fire, certainly not a big box fire. So, but the other thing I think that sadly, as each day passes and each year passes, we're going to have more and more experiences with bad things going wrong in these properties. Yeah. And there's going to be more and more hard lessons to learn, where we can come back later on and say, hey, we need to revise this fire code in some form or fashion, or maybe we need to downsize this building. Is there a way to build 3 smaller buildings and set them apart far enough where one doesn't burn the other one down and we can contain it? What's the occupancy going to be used for? What happens if 20 years from that a company goes out of business? Who's going to occupy it next? And what are they putting in there? Are they putting people in there? Are they putting, hazardous materials in there? So I think we're going to see more and more problems from these buildings just because there's more and more of them that are out there. And that's my concern. I know you and I have joked a couple of times. There's a part of me that sometimes thinks that the biggest enemy of the fire service right now is that fire code. That's just an opinion, but I can show you buildings in Dallas that, as an ops chief, before I retired, it kept me awake at night because we had no access, to the building. There would be no access in a fire because you'd have everybody fleeing the building and they'd eat up our fire lane, and we couldn't. I can think of one building that's got hundreds and hundreds of residential people living in that building, and we can't. There's no way we can even get an aerial ladder to that building. Nowhere on any of the four sides. It's not possible. And so the question is, how does the fire code allow that? Where's the disconnect between what the fire code says and how the operations world is going to have to solve that problem someday? I think that's where the disconnect is.
Certainly seems to be some conflicted priorities at time. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, brother, thank you very much. On behalf of the entire Air Coalition team, we're grateful to you. We're grateful to all the authors who contributed to our supplement. As Michael described in the opening of this, the response has been just phenomenal, really good. And it didn't surprise me when I was reading through your articles and editing things and putting it together. I've read a lot of things through the years. I've been at it a long time. When the material jumps out to me as really compelling, I know we've got something strong. And so I hope for our listeners, I hope you will check out the supplement. We'll provide a link to the supplement so you can get your own copy. If you're coming to any of our fire conferences, we'll have some hard copies of the supplement available there. If you have additional questions and want to reach out to any of our authors, we can certainly facilitate that. You can reach out to Michael and I either through social media or to the Firefighter Air Coalition website at aircoalition.org. We are all about firefighter air, man. Our tagline is more air, more time. The more air you have, the more time you have to attack the fire. The more air you have, the more chances you have that you're actually going to carve a path and get to where people are trapped and do the search and do the rescues. And certainly on the other side of this, the more air you have, the better you use your air, the more time you're going to have when it's time for you to hang the coat up on the hook. And you now want to enjoy a nice long retirement and see your grandkids grow up and grow old with your spouse and avoid some of these terrible medical buildings that so many of our friends are in right now. And so we at the Air Coalition are just very desirous of providing any answers, any education, any training we can to facilitate that. We would love to have you come join us, join our mission. We appreciate fire engineering partnering with us. Michael, anything as we close out our radio show today?
Nope. Thank you all for the gift of your time and your attention. We appreciate you. Stay safe out there.
God bless everybody. We'll catch you on the next edition of the Mikey G and Mikey D show. Rock on.
This podcast is brought to you by Firehouse Subs, the firefighter-founded hot sub chain with a passion for hearty and flavorful food, heartfelt service, and public safety. Ready for your next mission? Firehouse Subs is offering firefighters the opportunity to continue serving after service, now as restaurant owners. Learn more at firehousesubsfranchising.com.